Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caitlin Lesnack. I will be moderating today's town hall. Today we're going to hear from the two candidates for State Senate District representing Purchase. We have Julie Killian and George Latimer. Many of you are registered to vote on campus, and therefore will be voting for one of the two candidates here today. The state legislature is an often ignored aspect of government, especially during presidential election years. Despite the fact that state government has a much larger say on issues affecting education than the federal government does. Right now, I'm just going to go over the rules of today's forum. Each candidate will give a 1.5-minute introduction of themselves. Afterwards, I will ask the candidates a series of questions to which they will have each 2 minutes to respond. When that round of questions is over, the candidates will take a few questions from audience members. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to those questions as well. Finally, each candidate will give a 90-second closing statement at the conclusion of the Q&A section of the forum. I would like to remind the candidates that this is not a debate, it is a forum. We expect the candidates to spend their time talking about their own plans for the state and not on their opponents. Additionally, we expect audience members to refrain from cheering or booing during the candidates' introductions, answers, and conclusions. We ask this to ensure that the candidate can each fully and accurately answer all aspects of the question and use their time to answer the questions without interruption. So, no matter how you feel, we would ask the audience members to hold their applause or jeers. Thank you all for being here, and just so you know, we will be posting coverage of the event later on today. So the one exception to the rule is right now. I would like to thank you to invite you to welcoming the Democratic nominee, George Latimer, and the Republican nominee, okay, so we're going to be doing the introductions first. Yes, we're going to do a coin flip.
Flip, and I'm really bad at coin flips. So we're going to be very transparent about it and not do a fast step or anything like that either, unlike some debates. So who wants to call it?
I'll let Ms. Killian call.
You guys call?
Heads. That's all right.
It has landed on tails. All right, you trust me, thank you. So,
just advise us, we go first in the openings, what do we do in the closings?
So basically every time we have you guys talk, we'll just alternate starting now. So
what do you do with the closing, just so we know?
It'll be whoever comes up next in the final questioning.
I think it is that you have you said in your notes that you have 90 seconds at the end for each candidate to make a closing remark. Is that
I'm just trying to understand the sequence, that's all. I think we've both been through this debate in a number of different ways. Sometimes you open first and you also close first. Sometimes you open first and you close last. We just want to know what the rules are.
Okay, well, in that case, then whoever opens now will close. And we'll go last, very last.
So if it's my choice, I'll open first then. Anyway, I'm George Latimer. I am a Democratic candidate. I'm also a candidate of the Working Families Party and the Women's Equality Party. I'm serving at the end of my second 2-year term in the state Senate. As I'm fond of saying, I'm 62 years old and I'm a sophomore. I don't know if anybody else on the campus can make that claim. I assume today, when we get to the questions, we're going to cover a lot of issues. Let me just touch on a couple up front. And I'm making a presumption over the distance in our age is what might be important to you. I have the distinction of being endorsed by the Sierra Club and the New York League of Conservation Voters, and I tied for the highest score on environmental issues in the New York State Senate in the last session. I assume we'll talk about environmental issues. I look forward to that. I've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood and a number of choice organizations. I assume we'll talk about a woman's right to choose somewhere during this debate. I have received endorsement of the Journal News and the Examiner News, which is a weekly newspaper. With that, that may lead us to talk about some local issues, whether you live on campus, how you interact with the Harrison and the Port Chester and the White Plains communities, all of which are in the 37th district. We might talk about that. I think the most important thing is that you're watching your first presidential election, the worst presidential election that I can recall in my life. My first vote came in the Nixon-McGovern election, which is ancient history to you. But the bottom line was, I thought that was a pretty bad race, and of course now we have not even so much even just the two candidates, it's the tone of the campaign. So my hope today is that the tone of our conversation will be on substance, that we'll each be able to articulate what it is we believe in. If we disagree, the disagreements will be on substance and not on personalities. I don't intend to break the harmony of the moment, because this is as much a learning experience for you as it is an informational experience for you.
Was that little noise, was that the?
That was the time.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yes.
I
Sorry.
apologize now.
No,
Sometimes in our
That
meetings,
was
we
it.
have someone that sits in front, like, hold on, like, you have 30 seconds left.
I haven't yet.
Jessica.
There we go.
Okay.
Cool. So when you're ready. We did so sorry.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today, and I really appreciate the interest of you guys at SUNY Purchase in hearing from both of us and being interested in the political process. So I am Julie Killian. I live in Rye, New York. I'm a mother of 5, and what I would call just a regular citizen who's been involved in my community for the last 25 years, involved in my children's schools, the art center, the library, a soup kitchen, done a lot of advocacy work for Autism Speaks, and for the last 4.5 years, I've been a member of the Rye City Council. And I'm hoping to be your next state senator. I got involved in politics because I got involved on a school board race back in 2009 in Rye. We had a very contentious election, and I was helping a friend run, and that's when I discovered that there was lots of things that happened at the local level that are really determined up in Albany. And I started to follow those issues, learn about them. It's also when I realized I really loved public policy, so I would, for you guys, encourage you to keep an open mind always for all of your lives about different things to get involved in, no matter what you study here. So I started to follow the issues. I did a lot of helping of candidates get elected that I felt like had the same values and interested in the same positions that I was. And then in 2012, I was appointed to the Rye City Council. I've run twice since then. The reason I'm running for state senate is because I feel like there's not enough people up in Albany. Was that it?
No.
Okay.
You can finish that up.
Not enough people in Albany that are doing the business of the people and making real change in New York that we sorely need.
Thank you both. So to start off, our first question is just if you guys could both in general go over your plan to deal with the rising cost of higher education.
Wow,
All right.
that's it.
All right. So I'll go with Senator Latimer.
I opened first, didn't I?
You open and then she went, and now we're going to have you go. Does that make sense? Yeah.
The single basic, most important thing in higher education, in terms of the affordability of it, from a state standpoint, is what we do with our SUNY system, the system that you all are a member of. That is the most economical education that exists. I think our state investment in the 4-year and 2-year institutions have to be more robust. The heads of each of the different campuses have their own individual plans to try to make each of these campuses have a certain appeal that will allow them to have both in-state and out-of-state students and to grow the student base, which is important for the revenue, so that you can have a robust financial structure in these campuses. That's important because that's really what affects the cost of education and level of tuition. This year in the state legislature, we did not increase tuition this year, and it was a controversial decision from the economic side of the SUNY campus, but there have been a number of increases in consecutive years. If you are above the level of freshman, you know that, or you know that through your parents, depending on whoever's paying for your college education. I also think that the state's role and the county's role in the support of the community college system is critical. And again, we have to deal with available resources. Now, in the community college structure, which if you're an underclassman, you're here, not at a community college, that is a gateway to the SUNY system as we go forward. The support of the TAP program, Tuition Assistance Program, is very important. There's been threats to cut that over the years. If you are a beneficiary of that, that can be an important element of it. Just to make the personal connection, I grew up in a blue-collar family. My dad was a maintenance man. My mom was a factory worker. I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon, went to public schools there. from this area. You may know the geography, you may not, but it's an urban setting not dissimilar from the Bronx. And I was a commuter to college, and that was a great financial strain for my parents. So when people talk to me about how tough it is to put kids through college, I have one daughter who went through college. That's not as much as other of my friends had who have multiple number of children. But it's a big financial cost. But I also know that a college education is essential, and I also know that a college education is not enough unto itself.
I am very upset. I have 5 children, and the high cost of college is something that's of great concern to me, as it is to many of you, and the necessity of taking out student debt. And one of the things that I want to focus on when I'm in Albany is a better business climate in New York, so that we can have more vibrant communities, more jobs, so that when you guys get out of school, and hopefully many of you will stay in New York, there will be more opportunity for you. And more business brings more tax revenue, allows us to fund more higher education and to fund all the other things that we truly are passionate about, including education. One of the things that I see, not just in New York, but across the country, is administrative costs at many colleges are going up, and not enough money into the classrooms. And I don't have the answer for that, but to me, one of the things that does contribute to it is, and I see this all over New York State, is the bureaucracy and paperwork that's required, not only of nonprofits and schools in New York, and also of businesses. And that is something I want to look at very closely when I'm in Albany, because that is the thing I think that contributes. And when college costs started to go up drastically was when they started very often when we talked about the TAP program, Pell Grants, just because students get aid, somehow I think universities feel like they can increase their costs almost because the students are getting the aid, and that has contributed to the high costs of college. New York has been lucky that they have not taken the route yet, and I don't know if it's in the future, of taking more out-of-state students. Many other states, when they started to cut funding for their state universities, have then started to look for more out-of-state tuition, because that out-of-state tuition is higher than what you pay in-state. And I don't know if I want to see New York go in that direction, because I would like kids in New York to have access.
Thank you both. So earlier in the year, the New York State government approved a tuition freeze at SUNY and CUNY schools across the state. If elected to the Senate, would you support an indefinite tuition freeze once this freeze expires?
I don't want to raise tuition, but I can't say right now, not knowing the situation in New York, whether or not I would support any permanent freeze. As I said earlier, New York State budget is about $156 billion. We have a little less than 20 million people in New York. Florida's budget is $80 billion. They have a little more than 20 million people. I know those two numbers are not apples to apples, but I feel like there's a lot of waste and bureaucracy and money spent in New York State, not for the betterment of our kids and our businesses and the people here. And if we could spend our money wisely, we would have more money for education, for the environment, for the arts, and all those things. So I can't say that I would support a permanent freeze, because I think you need to look at the economics, but I certainly would want to incent the SUNY system, put less bureaucracy on them, and then they need less people to deal with that, and hopefully less administrators. No offense to Betsy Robertson over there, who does an amazing job, but you know, and I do that on the K through 12 system also, where there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of paperwork, and we're taking administrators out of classrooms, and they need to spend more time in the classrooms helping the teachers, developing teachers. I do believe that if someone wants to go to college, they should be able to go to college. But one of the things that has been happening in New York, and I think is a good trend, is the CTE schools, which is the career and technical education. This is in high schools, although some of the high schools, most of these are in New York City. Some of them do have a junior college component with them. Because I don't think every kid has to go to college. If you want to go, I think you should be able to go, but I don't know that every child needs to go, and I think there's a lot of specialized industries that kids are interested in that we can provide vocational education for.
I think when the governor submits his budget to the legislature in the middle of January, which is when we start to deal with these issues, and I assume by then the SUNY Board of Trustees would have had some input on what the budget is, I would expect it to have a budget freeze for tuition for the next academic year. But what I would also expect to see is the amount of money that New York State is going to contribute to offset the impact of what the lack of revenue from tuition is on the operation of the campuses. Because the problem we have is that what was done in this budget was to freeze tuition, but not to offset that with state revenue to the various elements of the SUNY campus. That could manifest itself in cuts. It could manifest itself in personnel cuts, meaning less classes, less services. It could manifest itself in less equipment or maintenance, things that have to be done. So my understanding is that this was a timeout. This was a chance to try to be rational and understand where do we go forward. We do need a predictable, this is what the SUNY administrators have said at each campus, I think it makes sense. We need a predictable way to look at how revenue is going to operate. And I don't think it will ever be a permanent freeze. There is nothing in this world that's permanently frozen in anything. But I do think that if there's a strategy to grow the number of students that come in, and that grows revenue, that the state's contribution and where appropriate the county's contribution is rationally analyzed over a couple of years, then I think you can look at a tuition situation that isn't what it was, which is you get hit again, and you get hit again, or you get a freeze and we're not sure what the impact is going to be, and the impact is felt on the administrative side of it. So, and of course you must understand one other thing, it's very important. In New York State budget, we get a bill for education, higher education. It's one bill. And if I showed it to you, your eyes would pop out of your head. I'm not a lawyer by profession. I'm a reasonably intelligent guy. I read the bills, try to understand as best as I can. It is hundreds of pages of detailed legal language. And you get to vote yes or no on the whole package of things.
The amount of state aid provided by the Tuition Assistance Program has not kept up with the rising cost of tuition. In what ways will you reform the way New York State handles aid for college students?
I would support an increase in TAP funding. We've had problems over the last number of years where there's been an effort to decrease TAP funding, and then also not just in the aggregate amount of funding, but how it flows through the process. You have students who are part-time students, and under recent revaluation may be ineligible for TAP. We have graduate students. I said earlier, and I know when we have 2-minute intervals to speak, I'll have to tack on comments in the next comment to finish my thought from the prior conversation. But you know what I already know. Both of us have master's degrees, and in this world, a bachelor's degree may not be enough for where you have to go. So it may be that a student has to go on to get a master's degree in their chosen field to have proper employability. And so I think TAP extension into the master's programs is also part of it. But again, it does come down to money, and it comes down to how we prioritize competing interests. Higher education or K-12 education, transportation, housing, you name it, corrections, healthcare, all of those things are competing interests. And when you run for this office, you have to try to figure out how you're going to balance all those competing interests in a world where there's a limited amount of money. It's just like the money you have in your pocket. I don't know what you have in your pocket, but whatever you have is not unlimited. And if you're going to go to a grocery store to buy some stuff, you're going to have to figure out how much of what things you're going to buy, because you can't buy everything that you see. And you might be, but most of us can't. But I think that's the same challenge we have in the state, is to figure out how to make TAP somewhat more robust. And targeted means targeted. That's important. I think you have to test it based on need and make sure that those who get it, get a higher increment of it, are the ones that need it the most. And then out of that process, rationally, you look at how you're going to apply it for the part-time students and for the graduate students, which will extend the cost of what the overall program is. And I gave you 11 seconds. Maybe I'll get this back on here. Maybe. Probably not.
I was in support of increasing the TAP program. When I went to college, there were 6 kids in our family, and my parents definitely couldn't afford to send all of us to college. So I took out student loans and worked every summer. I was a camp counselor during the day, and I waitressed at a country club and a pizza restaurant at night from the age of 13 up through even the summers in college. And I had to take out student loans. So I paid for some of it myself, took out student loans, which I paid back long after I graduated. It's not an easy thing to do, so I totally feel for anybody that's in that situation. One program that I have seen, this is actually in the state of Ohio, where you mentioned freezing rates. In the state of Ohio, some of the public schools there have, when a freshman comes in, they guarantee your tuition rate for a 4-year period. So, you know, that would mean sometimes kids would be paying different levels of tuition depending on when they came in. But I actually like that approach and would like to look into it in New York, because I feel like if you know what your expenses are going to be and your parents know, you're better able to plan. The high cost, you know, I just saw a stat, and I'm not going to get it exactly, but I believe it was that New York, people living in New York have more student loan debt than any other state in the country. And I worry greatly about, you know, my own children getting out of college and finding jobs, and certainly for all of you here, and in making this a place where there are jobs to be had, so kids will stay here and keep it a vibrant community. And you know, the affordability factor is an issue for everybody, but it's an issue for seniors in our community, and it's an issue for the young adults more than anybody. So it's absolutely, overall affordability, something I want to focus on.
So many students with a college degree are underemployed and not working in their field of study. What is your plan to provide jobs to students who are frictionally unemployed?
I mentioned a couple things earlier, but New York has 750,000 business regulations. And when I go around going around the community for 8 months, going to events, meeting business owners, the biggest complaint that I get is rules that are out of date, heavy paperwork, and things that just don't make sense for the particular businesses. So, you know, 750,000 regulations, we've got a lot on those books that we need to get rid of and we need to look at. I know the state Senate did do a program where they went around the state and talked to different businesses and different industries, and they came up with a whole report, and sadly, nothing was done with it. I think the Senate Republicans actually did that, and then nothing happened. I read through it, and it's just consistently, time after time, outdated decision. And I'll just give you a small one that an independent bookstore owner complains to me about. Because she has a food component to her bookstore, she is required by the State Department of Labor to pay her employees every week. She has an outside service through her payroll. It's more expensive for her to do it every week. Her employees are fine with her doing it every other week, but the state makes her do it every week. That may not sound like a big deal, but when you're a small independent bookstore, that does make a big, big difference. So to me, to streamline business regulations, and these are things also that are not just affecting businesses, they're also affecting nonprofits. Maybe some of you will be interested in working at nonprofits. The amount of regulation that we're making nonprofits go through that are providing many times much needed services to the disabled and doing other things, environmental work, arts work, whatever, really has to stop, because without a vibrant business community, there are not jobs here. And you know, you are underemployed. And you know, I was there when I worked in New York City. My mother was a caterer. I went home on the weekends and worked for her. So, you know, it's tough.
You know, I'm not convinced that across the board actions are what's needed. I think you have to target action, and you have to look at what are the trend lines for the various industries that are growth industries, and then try to see what we can do to incentivize those industries. We've done that with the entertainment industry, and with certain targeted tax breaks have increased the amount of the entertainment industry, the filming industry in New York. Many people in this particular college are focused on performing arts and want to have careers in that field of endeavor. And I think, and sometimes we get criticized for that. They say, well, you're picking winners and losers. I don't think you're picking winners and losers. You're trying to look at what are the jobs of the future. If in the current day you don't have enough jobs for blacksmiths, but you've just seen that the automobile is now a new invention, you try to transition your skill set from shoeing horses to working on car engines. And that's going to secure for you a better future. If this was 1906, it's 2016. And the technology industries, other growth industries. We can improve that around the state. Although we're all sitting here in Westchester County, some of you live in other parts of the state, if not other parts of the country. Broadband access throughout upstate New York, I think, is an absolute necessity. We take for granted in the downstate region the extent of communication that we have every day, the phones and the laptops that we have, not so in parts of upstate New York. And that's going to require an infrastructure investment to bring that area of the state up to speed, and with that will be additional jobs. I think in renewable energy, certainly solar is the most prominent one, but there are others as well. That's an industry I think we need to invest in. And I think what we try to do is not just say, well, if we give across-the-board benefits to everybody, we'll generate jobs. I come out of a particular industry. That industry, property taxes, was an important but not an essential part of the cost factor of what made the business work. What made the business work was picking the right market that had the right amount of demand for it, and then that generated enough revenue to create profit. And I think each industry is different, and I think we have to be very intelligent and selective and see what trend lines are happening in order for you to have a better opportunity.
So do you support the maintenance of effort provisions to provide adequate state funding to the SUNY and CUNY system?
Yes, and I also fought for the same thing when I was in the Westchester County Legislature. I chaired the county legislature for a couple of years. And again, I mentioned, because we're talking generally here, we're talking about the overall SUNY system, which includes the community colleges. And I fought for maintenance of effort at the county government level, because what's happened over the years is that each of these governments operate as separate corporations, and every entity wants to spend less and have more money for its own purposes, whether it's for spending purposes or to reduce taxes and get the credit for it. So yes, maintenance of effort is something I think is essential. But again, it's you're making a big stew. I can't cook to save my life, but you're making a big stew, and there's different elements in it. If you ever watch somebody who knows what they're doing, which would be my parents or a host of people that know how to cook, they calibrate how much oregano they put in, how much pepper they put in it, and then they taste it, and then they see how much more or less of these different ingredients you need. And maintenance of effort, it falls into that same financial mix when the budget is put together. Now, we get to question in the budget review process the various commissioners to try to understand what their thinking was in the budget that's before us, and then we try to make some recommendations on how to adjust it. The governor and the executive branch prepares the budget. So I would expect to see maintenance of effort in the budget when we see it, if I'm there to see it, but I would also want to question and determine whether this was as real as it appears to be. Because without maintenance of effort, you will have diminution of services, and it will affect you, it will affect the staff, it will affect the administration, their ability to perform.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of the maintenance of effort, but one of the things that I see, and I don't know that it's as big an issue here at SUNY Purchase or at any of the SUNY schools, but certainly an issue with the CUNY schools where they are getting kids showing up that are not ready for college, which brings us back, and we've talked so much about the state university level education, but we have kids going through the K through 12 system in New York that are showing up at these schools and not ready, and that is putting a huge burden because they're having to have classes to get the kids ready up to the university level, and then the teachers cannot teach the college level classes that they are supposed to be doing. And I have called, there's a lot of frustration with, we spend more per capita per child in New York State on our K through 12 education than any other state in the union. And there's a number of different rankings to look at outcomes. One ranking I looked at, we were 19th in outcomes. I just looked at something where they ranked us 25th in outcomes, 35th on the quality of our schools, which shocking. We have a lot of amazing schools in New York, but not every kid is getting the benefit of some of these good schools. So I'm a big supporter of public education at K through 12 level, but I am also a supporter of charter schools, the parochial schools, the yeshivas, the other schools, and looking at what the best practices are at some of these schools so we can really educate all our kids so they all show up at SUNY, at CUNY, and they're ready for a full college education, because it's a huge problem when you look at the number of kids, and particularly the New York City schools, that are failing, third grade math exams, 8th grade English exams. It's a real shame, and educating these kids before they you want them the same opportunities that all of you are having and my kids are having, and right now it's not happening.
So that concludes the prepared questions portion of the forum. So we'd like to open it up
Hi, thanks for coming in, both of you. My name is Jerome Handler. I wanted to ask in particular about rational tuition, which is a policy that has affected SUNY, especially SUNY Purchase, from 2010 to 2015 when the freezing of tuition finally passed. On this campus in particular, we as a student, or as a student government, as a student body, have come out in opposition for rational tuition, and we've come out in opposition for raising tuition because what we found was that in the SUNY system, 70% on average of all funding for these campuses are from private sources, basically from tuition, from any fees incurred by students, and 30% comes from state funding, whether direct or indirect. We as a student, or many of us as students, feel that this is largely inappropriate and it's unfair for students as a whole to take the burden of costs when it's supposed to be a public education system. So if you were to be elected as state senator, how would you work to fix this problem, and how would you work to restore at least a 50-50 balance as it potentially should be?
That's a tough one, and I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know that I ever see it going to 50-50, just based on the budget that is at New York State and the money that is needed in so many areas. Again, I'll restate. I think the New York State budget wastes a lot of money, and nobody up there talks about that. And we keep continuing to spend money. There's a lot of corruption in Albany, as you've seen. 39 legislators since 2000 have gone to jail. So, to me, part of my focus will be on, shining a light on what happens in Albany, so that hopefully there's less incentives for corruption, but there's illegal corruption, there's legal corruption, and there's dysfunction up there. And those are a lot of things I'm focused on in hopes that we do have money at the end of the day for the things that are really important to us. And to me, educating our kids is one of the most important things that we do. I do know I don't know too many states where it's actually 50-50, and we really shouldn't necessarily worry about what happens in other states, but you look and you see and you try to find best practices. I just happen to be more familiar with the school in Ohio where one of my kids went, and they only get 10% funding from the state. So I'm not telling you to be happy with the 30%, but I know that it's a lot less in some other states. So I would say I could never guarantee you it would be 50. Do I want to put more money in education to spend it in the right ways and stop wasting money? Sure, but I hope that we could get there. But there's I'm also not I know Hillary Clinton's talked a lot about free college tuition, and I do believe that everybody has to have skin in the game to really appreciate what you're getting, to be putting something out there. Could we get there? I hope that the New York State budget would be in a situation where we could put more money here, but I can't guarantee it.
I think the answer to one of the questions before about maintenance of effort is where we begin. So that we say that basically what maintenance of effort means is that there's a floor and it doesn't continue to drop. And the fact that you have a tuition freeze this year is because of the hue and cry. The students and the parents of the students, reached us here as legislators and said we can't continue on the path doing this. The rational tuition plan was advanced because the people who are running these various colleges were being starved for money because the state wasn't increasing its contribution to it. And because you have a tax cap at the local level, county level and below, and because the policy of the state, the executive branch, has been not to increase spending by more than 2%, which is a very popular thing to say. If we're in a room full of senior citizens who own property, they're going to be loving hearing that. But on the other side of the coin, there's a price to pay, and sometimes that correlation isn't seen. That's why you have a freeze this year, because of the very concerns that you've expressed. Now the question is where we go from here. And I think what I've said earlier is that as I look at the budget that the governor presents to us, I'm going to be interested in seeing if the state is going to do its proper share to not just maintain, but to increase direct funding. What percentage that represents is hard to say. Anything that goes north of what you have now would put less pressure on tuition. There's also, I think, and this is where I think you have to free the individual campuses. This campus particularly has a very innovative administration in terms of what it's trying to do with the fiscal plan that it has. And I think that if given more flexibility out from under the heavy hand of the state, the management team of this place will find ways to generate additional revenue that isn't tuition and isn't direct state aid. Because you have a marketplace around us here that would see a value in being on campus for, you have the Newburgers here, you have performing arts facility that is really world-class entertainment. And I suspect that for this campus, and a couple of the others that are out there, there's a great opportunity if we can find ourselves the mindset to free up the local authority to do those things.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Hi, my name is Greg Cavuto, and I have a question regarding both of you with the New York State corporate tax. Do you support cutting it? If so, why or why not?
Well, New York State reduced a number of taxes in the last cycle of budget, not this cycle, but a year ago. We reduced manufacturing taxes in a dramatic way. I think that the question is to reduce it to be competitive with the areas that we compete with. We are realistically in competition with Connecticut and New Jersey for those kind of organizations. A company that's going to look, and I'll use the extreme examples, to look at North Dakota, which has minimal taxes across the board. Some states don't have state income taxes, New Hampshire and some others, isn't realistic because of the nature of the services that this state provides. We have an extensive public education system. Not every state has a SUNY system. Not every state has a Metro North commuter MTA commuter rail and so forth. But I think what we want to try to do is be competitive with the Connecticut's and the New Jersey around us. Now we're considered relatively high tax states, but if you look at just the state taxation, corporate taxation and other levels of fees of businesses, we are not as uncompetitive as we appear to be. It's the property tax burden that puts us into the 49th and 50th category in terms of taxation. And whenever people talk about New York as a state that's good for business, the property tax burden is what oftentimes tips the scale, because we're more mid-pack when it comes to those other levels of taxation. But I do think what I said earlier matters. I think if you have an across-the-board tax reduction for corporations, the question is, well, how will that generate additional jobs? Will Corporation A bank it and have a higher profit, or will they add jobs to the mix? Will they grow what they're doing and their presence in New York? Will they take the money and run? We had a program called Empire Zones a number of years ago that had a number of years of duration. And what we found was the corporations that took the Empire Zone benefit took the benefit until the benefit dried up. When the benefit dried up, they said, bye-bye, we're out. Thank you for the benefit while we had it. Didn't necessarily grow business. We have the same problem with industrial development agencies. Sometimes we grant benefits to the IDA, supposed to create permanent jobs. They don't. Thank you for the profit. We'll see you later. So we have to make sure there's a I'm sorry, just to finish stuff. You have to have a correlation between benefit that is made available, relief that's made available, and the result of that. How does that manifest itself in jobs or growth of the business?
I'm definitely in support of a cut to corporate taxes. We sort of, I don't like we had a startup New York program that the state has spent almost $250 million on trying to incent companies to come to New York and giving them tax breaks. That has failed miserably for a number of reasons, including the fact that it's virtually impossible to start a business because there's so much bureaucracy. But I would like, the businesses that are here, I'd like to keep them here. And businesses are leaving our state. Not only are we have more people leaving the state than any other state in the country. And businesses are leaving the state. Clearly, not all businesses can leave. Broadway can't leave. Real estate community can't leave. But to incent more business being done, people growing their businesses, yeah, I'd like to see corporate tax rates cut. Because very often it does flow, whether it flows to an owner of a company, if they own an entire company, that will then reinvest it in the company, or start a new company, or get paid out, if it's a big corporation, get paid out as dividends to people that live here, and they'll have more money. Absolutely in support of that. I think tax cuts have been shown, certainly on the business level. I'm hoping that on the national level we cut corporate business tax. We have the highest taxes in the nation, in the world, for our corporations, and that has hurt us severely in the world competitive market. But there are businesses. I do think we need to be. I don't think we need to be as competitive as New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and the coming around us. I think we need to be far more competitive. And Texas, Florida, all those companies decreasing corporate taxes, getting rid of corporate regulations, and it's working for them. But businesses do want to come to New York. I know it's cold here, but they do. There's a huge reservoir of talent here that businesses would like to have access to. But the fact that it costs so much to live here, property tax is high, it makes it tough to get people here. So in support of that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam Lang. I have two questions, if that's okay. So Governor Cuomo proposed spending almost $8 billion of the New York State budget to upstate power, nuclear power plants. I was wondering how you feel about that and how you feel about nuclear power in general as opposed to renewable energy like solar and wind.
I do not like I think it was almost $10 million subsidy that he has now done. I'm not opposed to nuclear power. It's a much cleaner power than almost anything else out there. We have a nuclear power plant in Westchester and Indian Point. If that's a safe place, if it's safe, according to Nuclear Regulatory Commission, then we should keep it going. But Cuomo went after Indian Point so much that they pulled out upstate plants, decided to leave, and that's why he had to give them $10 million to keep them here. And unfortunately, that money is disproportionately going to be affecting us down here, not upstate. We're going to have the brunt of that $10 billion, so it's going to make our energy costs much higher, which is another thing that will lead businesses out of New York. But I believe in all of the above energy policy. We should be doing wind, we should be doing solar, we should be doing nuclear. Anything, and continue to research. Hopefully there's something else down the line that will be even cheaper energy. So I'm not a fan of that subsidy because I think it will raise, what happens when you raise, it's not only companies that get affected by the rising energy costs, the lower income community, it's a huge problem for them because they have such a huge percentage of their budget that's spent on electricity and gas and whatnot, and that really isn't fair to that community either, who can afford it the least. So in general, the rising energy costs are not good for our state. I think we have the second highest costs in the country right now. So we do need to figure out a way to make it cheaper here, but this is kind of going in the opposite direction. So not in favor of that subsidy at all.
I think sometimes we put political science ahead of science, and we oftentimes, want an output for ideological reasons when in fact science doesn't, allow us that window. What we need to do as a society, not just as a state, is to determine how are we going to shift our energy usage in a way that will take us time and will require science to give us the answers, some of which is there now, most of which is not. I believe, from what I've read, that the greenhouse gas threat is a real threat. I've made the analogy many times before, watching my two parents, both of whom are smokers, deal with the threat of cigarette smoking in the mid-1960s when it first came out that cigarette smoking could be hazardous to your health. My father quit, my mother did not, and there was a difference in 8 years in their lifespan. So what appears to be a threat that some deny, and I'm not a scientist, I don't purport, I read what you read as a layman, and I've drawn the judgment that the overwhelming concern is that climate change is real, and we need to do steps toward that. What does that mean in practical terms? It means we have to advance the scientific research into a wide variety of renewables. Now, we know we have hydropower. That's been long a major part of our mix. And we're now looking at how do we get solar at a level of cost that it can be a more important part of the mix of our usage. If you go through the hierarchy of what's clean, coal is dirty. I've heard there's clean coal. I'm not really sure how clean coal is. And there's natural gas and there's nuclear. But the extractive industries create a host of different issues for us as we look down the line, where you're still dealing with fossil fuels. Maybe this fuel is cleaner than that fuel, but it's still not clean overall. So we have to have a scientific structure that gives us how much we can tap solar, how much we can tap biocell, and all of those things, so that we can turn away from the more traditional sources. And it's going to take time for us to get there. But we have problems with the long term of nuclear because there's spent fuel rods. We know no way of making them safe. But we don't have an alternative amount of, I'm sorry, just finish this thought. We don't have an alternative strategy that tells us we can get this many megawatts from a different strategy. That's what we have to work for, and maybe the scientists who can figure that out is in this room today.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask, if elected, how do you feel about legalizing cannabis recreationally, like like states like Colorado and Washington have been doing?
I'm going to be blunt with you, I'm not there at this stage of the game. I have voted for use of marijuana for medical purposes, and New York has a relatively restrictive law. We haven't really seen how well it has functioned yet. I think you have to give it a little while to go. Washington, Colorado, I guess, I don't know if Massachusetts just passed it this month or whatever they did. There's a number of states, maybe there's more than just Washington and Colorado that I'm aware of that have done it. And I want to see how it plays out. And look, I understand the recreational use of marijuana. In my generation as a young man, it was a commonly used recreational drug. I never tried it, and it was a square, I don't know, whatever. But the bottom line is, I'll tell you what I'm concerned about. And I'm concerned about the gateway effects that any drugs have toward much more serious drugs. Now, no one is going to say that marijuana is what an opioid addiction is. But I'm concerned that there is some effect of a mindset when you either move into an addictive fashion or you're looking for a better high, and that leads you to something that's more dangerous for the society. And then there's some secular concerns that I have, and I want to study what's happening in Colorado and Washington. We have a terrible drinking while driving crisis already with alcohol as a legal product. You know, how much stoned while driving do we have, and what are we going to do to deal with that? So I know in a room like this, I'd love to say, let's legalize it recreationally and with a big round of applause. I'm not there. But, you know, I'm ready to see how we analyze these issues, and maybe in due time, you know, we get to a different place. But right now, I'm not there.
I am 100% against legalizing marijuana. And I do know that I started a drug and alcohol coalition in Rye, which I started working on back in 2011. And the problem that I saw at the time were high school students smoking too much pot, drinking too much alcohol, and parents kind of throwing their hands up saying, what can we do? Fast forward to 5 years later, this drug and alcohol coalition called Rye Action for Children and Teens, which 2 weeks ago I just got federal funding for $125,000 a year coming into our community. You may or may not know, but in the interim of starting that, we've had 6 children die in Rye of drug overdoses, which highlights the heroin and opiate issue. Heroin and opiates, they're killers. The marijuana and the alcohol is killer of dreams. And marijuana is actually a gateway drug. There's many studies that show that now. It does change the way your brain's wired, and one of the problems that we see now is because of the legalization in other states, the perception of risk by most kids is so far down, and they think it's not risky at all. And we're seeing kids start younger, do more, and it's stronger. So when I was 15 years old, in 1975, the amount of THC in marijuana was 0.75%. Right now, it's up to about 30%, and that doesn't include when you heat it with butane and drain it and put it into edibles when it's up at 90 or 100%. So I am absolutely opposed to it. Colorado, I know the governor of Colorado has gone on record to say he absolutely regrets signing the legislation. The social costs have become much higher than whatever revenue they're taking in. And I know I have friends in Colorado who complain that the revenue, they were supposed to all go to education, it's not going to education. So the social costs of it are so much higher than they ever anticipated. So not for that.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Stephen. I just want to ask you about recently the New York State government passed a law that would ultimately raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I just want to get your reaction to the new minimum wage.
I am not a fan of the minimum wage going up to $15 an hour. I do think the minimum wage should have gone up a bit. And the reason is, if we're doing this to try to help the low-income community and people to live above the poverty level, that's not the best way to accomplish it. To me, what we should have done is increase the earned income tax credit. Before this issue came about, I've been long-term involved with the soup kitchen, and what would happen is people come in that are on welfare, they come in and they've been offered an increase in pay or a promotion, and they can't always take it because that would cut, then their welfare and their transfer payments would go away. And that is a bit of a national issue. Carly Fiorina was the only presidential candidate that talked about it because there's a welfare cliff. To me, we got to get rid of the welfare cliff, because as your income is increasing, your payments, SNAP and everything else should come off gradually so that you're able to take that promotion, able to take that increase in pay. So what has happened with the minimum wage is we've decreased teen unemployment, which is another big issue, certainly in the minority community, and those kids aren't getting that first job so that they learn responsibility, have to show up for a job. It's also severely hit the nonprofit community. I know in particular our RY YMCA has estimated they're going to have to raise an additional $500,000 over the next 5 years to cover the increased wage cost. Because it's not just raising people that were below whatever the minimum wage was, everybody else. Once you raise the people on the bottom, everybody else goes up. So they have said to me they're just going to hire less kids in the summers. I know the Westchester Business Council has a jobs program in the summer. They have said they're going to be doing less of it. So it's, to me, there was a better way to help people. So we need to get rid of the welfare cliff, increase income tax credits. Just quickly, in the restaurants, they've said to me, they say, can I just finish this one thought? They say, I can't pay my dishwasher $15 an hour. What I used to do, pay them less, they're unskilled, but then they come in and I train them, and then they move up to the line cook. Maybe become the chef, maybe become the restaurant owner. But everybody I've talked to, restaurants, fast food places, is looking at automation now. That's not hiring people, that's hiring robots.
I supported the increase in the minimum wage. I have supported earlier in my career increases which were calibrated when the minimum wage was at $7.15 and we moved up to $9 an hour. Let's keep in mind we call it a $15 minimum wage, but that's $1 per year over the next 6 years, I think, to get to the $15 limit. So it's an annual increase that is, I think, a reasonable labor cost, which can be absorbed by most organizations. I will agree that the not-for-profit communities have a problem, and I think the undone work of the legislature and the governor was not to come up with a strategy to deal with the not-for-profit world. But I have to tell you, I've served in private sector world for a long time. There isn't a business on the planet that doesn't want to lower labor costs. And one of the reasons why we have plants in Mexico and Hungary and Vietnam is because corporate executives interpret their fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders to include the lowest possible labor. And the question you have to ask yourself here in the United States of America, do we believe that is the policy we want to pursue? We certainly want people to have the maximum skill set and grow and what have you, but there will always be somebody doing something at a certain level of low labor. And the question is, should those jobs be receiving a wage that is stronger? It's not, you can't live on minimum wage if that's the only thing you're doing. And most of the time you're taking 2 and 3 jobs, which is what I did in part of my life. My summer jobs that I've had glorious jobs such as assistant floor waxer, working in a car dealership in the auto parts department, breaking tires down in the tire department, things that you do because that's where you're at. You're not yet able to command a higher salary with skill sets. But when I go through this community, I see tremendous wealth in places like Bronxville, Rye, and Armonk. It's earned wealth, it's not stolen. But I also see people in Purchase that are struggling. They're working hard, and the compensation they receive isn't enough for them to put food on the table. So I think at the end of the day, there's a certain humanity that comes into this. And I would say that organizations like the Roman Catholic Church, which is seen as conservative in a lot of ways, they're fully in support of this because they understand the social justice element of it. Thank you both very much.
So if there are no more audience questions, that concludes today's forum. So please join me in thanking both of the candidates. All right. You guys both have 90 seconds to do closing statements. I do apologize for that.
Yes.
So I'm a mother of 5, a wife, a sister, a friend, co-founder of a coalition that fights drug abuse, longtime community advocate, local elected official, and I would love to be your next state senator. And much of my experience, particularly being the mother of 5, informs how I feel about the policy and what happens in New York. And right now, New York is the least economically competitive state in the country, and it's a lot of the corruption, both illegal and legal, that contributes to that, and something has to be done about it. I want to change what I view as a broken system and focus on the crushing tax burdens on our families, our seniors, our small businesses, and our youth. And get help for kids who are struggling with learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, substance abuse. So for me, the prescriptions to all that is one, to have term limits in Albany so we get fresh thinking there. There's a bunch of laws we have that I would get rid of that would make it easier and cheaper to live and do business in New York. One of those is something called the scaffold law. Look it up. It costs New Yorkers $1.4 billion a year. Something called the Wicks law, which has to do with public construction projects. Makes every project cost 20 to 30% more. I would also move Medicaid to the state level, and now part of it's at the county level, and reform that, which would do a long service to making it cheaper to be here in New York, and medical malpractice reform so healthcare is cheaper. And I would just encourage you guys to keep an open mind, whether it's this election or anything you do going forward. Keep an open mind. Don't look at the labels, particularly with an election. Don't look at whether someone's a Democrat or Republican. Keep an open mind and look at where they stand on positions and what they want to do.
It's been a long time since I was you, probably 4 years. And I know that looking across the time frame when you look at me, I remember looking at 60-year-old men when I was in my 20s, and I thought that this person couldn't possibly understand where I was coming from. And it may be that being 20, 22 in this day and age is extremely different from what it was like for me in the early 70s. I would tell you that on a night like tonight, I'd be caring about the 7th game of the World Series, and I probably, in the days before I was married, be interested in going to some places and parties where I might meet some girls, and I probably want to shoot some hoop, play touch football, and I wasn't thinking necessarily about big public policy issues such as we've talked about today. But the decisions that we have to make have to take into account not only where you're at today, but the world you're going to have in the future. And if you project 40 years to the future, I'm not lying, but the decisions that we make will affect you. What we do on the environment. We've had a lot of conversations about what you're going to do in these 4 years of college and how you're going to afford it. I would argue that we should have talked a lot more about our environment. Because 40 years from now, the environment you're going to be living in, I'm going to be long gone, or if I am around, I'm not going to be worth much to talk to. Those are issues that we decide now, and you will live with the consequences of it. And so all I would say is, I am a Democrat. I'm a Democrat because I believe in it, but I try to be flexible in my thinking. And I think you ought to look at records. You ought to look at what we say and what we believe. Cast the vote that you think is the best vote. I hope to have your consideration, and I hope to work for you if I am your senator for the next 2 years.
So thank you both for being here.